Some battles are never recorded in history books. Some heroes never wear medals. And some warriors walk on four legs, bearing silent scars of loyalty and sacrifice. Welcome to Vale Marks. In this powerful, true-to-life story, we follow the journey of Briggs. Not just a dog, but a forgotten soldier whose courage bridges generations. Stay with us until the very end, because what begins as a simple rescue unfolds into a profound lesson about trust, redemption, and the resilience of the human and canine spirit. As the great writer Ernest Hemingway once said, "The world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong at the broken places." Watch closely. This story might change the way you see courage forever. The desert air in Arizona clung dry and heavy, filled with the scent of dust, rusted metal, and something far less tangible: abandonment. Under the faded tin roof of the livestock auction yard, voices rose and fell like a tired tide. The sharp clang of gates, the low murmur of disinterested bidders, and the occasional bark or whimper echoed in the background. But in the farthest, darkest corner of the yard, there was no sound at all. Lot 82 lay silent. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't barking or growling like the others in their cages. He was still, a pit bull, aged beyond his years, his coat patchy with scars old and new. His left ear bore a ragged split, and one eye held a cloudy film over it. His body told the story of battles fought and lost, not in arenas, but in the quiet cruelty of human neglect. A limp in his back leg made his posture sag, but he tried to hide it, tried, and failed. The paper tag on his cage door read only, "Lot 82, male, injured." No history available. Below it, in faded ink, someone had scribbled a word that seemed less like a description and more like a sentence. Unadoptable. Buyers passed him by without a second glance. Some paused just long enough to shake their heads, scoff at the audacity of auctioning off a pit bull. "Dangerous breed," they muttered. Others chuckled cruelly. "No one's gonna take that one home." Their focus stayed fixed on the young, glossy-coated shepherds or playful lab pups that barked and wagged their tails eagerly, unaware that their fates balanced on bids. Lot 82 didn't bother looking up anymore. He had learned not to hope. But then, Evan Brooks walked in. He hadn't planned to. He'd driven out to the salvage yard across the highway, searching for a rare transmission part for a '69 Chevy pickup he'd been restoring in his spare hours. The auction yard was supposed to be just another forgotten corner of town he'd never need to revisit. And yet, something had drawn him here. Some unseen thread pulled him from his truck and through the creaking gates. At 35, Evan moved with the heaviness of someone who had already lived 3 lifetimes. His forearms bore fading ink from his Navy days, the kind of tattoos chosen in youth without the foresight of time. His hands were stained with grease and work, and his eyes, steel gray, unflinching, carried the quiet weight of loss. Loss that time had not softened. He wasn't looking for a dog. God knew he wasn't looking for responsibility. But as he paused by the pens, scanning the restless animals, his gaze stopped, almost unwillingly, at the dark corner. At Lot 82. The pit bull didn't move. His one good eye flickered upward, not with hope or fear, but with something quieter. Recognition. The kind of look two broken things give each other when they realize they share the same cracks. Evan's breath caught for half a second. A strange stillness settled between man and dog. The auctioneer's voice droned on in the background, but the words faded into static. All Evan could hear was the beat of his own pulse and the near imperceptible sound of the dog's breathing. Lot 82, injured male, Starting bid, $20. Do I hear 20? Silence. No hands lifted, no voices answered. $20. Less than the price of a spare tire, less than the cost of a meal at the roadside diner. Before Evan fully understood what he was doing, his hand went up. The auctioneer blinked in mild surprise. 20. Going once. A long pause. People whispered, smirked, moved on. Going twice. Evan waited, heart steady but unsure why. Sold, to the gentleman in the back. No applause, no congratulatory nods. Just the sound of the auctioneer scratching a name onto a clipboard and the creak of the cage latch being undone. Evan stepped forward, his boots crunched over gravel and hay. His hands, the same hands that had once gripped the cold steel of a rifle, the same hands that had held his son for the last time before the accident, now reached for a leash. Lot 82 did not flinch as the gate opened. He stood stiffly, favoring his bad leg, and walked forward without prompting. As if they'd rehearsed this moment before. As if, somewhere deep in the marrow of memory, he understood that this wasn't just another transaction. It was rescue. For both of them. Outside, the wind had shifted. The sky stretched wide and pale, clouds dragging slow shadows over the desert floor. Evan led the dog to his old pickup. The Pitbull hesitated only a moment before climbing into the passenger seat and curling up on the worn leather. Not out of comfort, but out of understanding. He was going somewhere. Finally. Evan sat behind the wheel, staring out over the auction lot where so many had turned away. He looked at the dog, at the ragged scars, the weary eyes. Something tightened in his chest. This wasn't a decision made by logic. It wasn't pity. It was something older, something almost ancestral. A link between soldiers. He started the engine. The truck rumbled to life, shaking slightly on its frame. Gravel kicked up beneath the tires as they pulled away, the sun casting long shadows behind them. No one knew, not the auctioneer, not the disinterested crowd, not even Evan himself, that this moment was more than a rescue. It was the beginning of a story written long before either man or dog had walked into that yard. A story shaped by war, loss, and the silent hope that even the forgotten could be found again. A destiny not yet fully revealed. The road home stretched long beneath a sky fading into twilight. Evan Brooks kept his hands steady on the steering wheel, though every so often his eyes drifted toward the passenger seat, or rather the passenger floorboard, where the Pitbull, Lot 82, lay curled in silence. The dog had not made a sound during the drive. No whine, no bark, not even a sigh. His ribs rose and fell beneath his scarred coat, breath measured and shallow. Evan wasn't sure if the stillness meant trust or resignation. The sun slipped behind the low desert hills as they pulled into Evan's property. The house sat at the edge of a worn-out field, a simple structure with weathered siding and a front porch that creaked with every breeze. It wasn't much, but it was his. Evan parked the truck, shut off the engine, and sat for a moment longer than he meant to. He hadn't thought this through. He had not planned to bring a dog home. He wasn't even sure what kind of man he was anymore. A rescuer, or just someone too stubborn to walk away. "Come on," he said quietly. The Pitbull didn't need to be told twice. He stood stiffly, bad leg dragging slightly, and followed Evan toward the porch. Not with the eager steps of a dog entering a new home, but with the weary gait of a soldier reporting for duty. Inside, the house smelled faintly of old pine wood and motor oil. The furniture was sparse, a couch that had seen better decades, a coffee table scarred with rings from too many forgotten mugs, and the framed photographs Evan kept flipped face down. Memories he wasn't ready to face. Not yet. Evan grabbed a faded towel and knelt beside the dog. He wiped down the Pitbull's cracked paws, careful not to press too hard. The dog stood still, neither resisting nor reacting. His gaze stayed fixed on the door, ever vigilant. "You need a name," Evan murmured, more to himself than the dog. "I can't just keep calling you Lot 82. A few names surfaced and faded. He tried a couple out loud, watching for any flicker of response. Nothing. Then his mind settled on a name he hadn't spoken in years. "Briggs," he said softly. "After Sergeant Briggs." "Afghanistan." The dog's ear twitched. Just once. That was enough. "Briggs it is." Evan laid out an old blanket beside the fireplace and set down a metal bowl of water. Briggs didn't drink. He didn't eat the dry kibble either. Instead, he curled into himself on the blanket, eyes half closed but alert, as if sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. That night, Evan didn't sleep much either. Memories crept in. Memories he had tried to bury beneath years of routine and hard labor. His wife's laugh, their son's wide smile on the morning of his last Little League game, the way their hands had felt in his before the accident. Before the truck that ran the red light ended the life he thought was unbreakable. Evan had told himself he'd moved on, but the empty house said otherwise. Briggs seemed to sense the restless weight of the night. He didn't whimper or seek comfort like most dogs would. He simply lay still, a silent sentinel. As dawn broke pale and cold, Evan found Briggs already sitting by the front door. Head high, ears perked, watching. The first few days passed in quiet observation. Evan tried to coax the dog into normal routines, toys, treats, even a walk to the edge of the field. Briggs showed no interest. No barking at passing cars, no tail wagging, no curiosity. But Evan soon noticed other patterns, strange ones. Whenever Evan moved from room to room, Briggs always advanced first. He checked corners before entering, pausing at thresholds like he was clearing the space. He responded to sharp sounds not with fear, but with immediate, purposeful alertness. It wasn't just instinct. It was training. One evening, as dusk settled into the valley, Evan stood by the back window sipping coffee. The old barn door creaked in the breeze. Before Evan could even react, Briggs was at his side, body tense, eyes fixed on the darkness outside. Evan tried an old Navy command without thinking. "Hold." Briggs froze. No hesitation. The hairs on Evan's arms lifted. This wasn't just a rescue dog. Briggs had once known orders, known purpose. Somewhere, somehow, he had served. The realization tightened something deep in Evan's chest. That same night, another clue surfaced. Sophie, the 10-year-old granddaughter of his elderly neighbor, had come by as she often did, skipping up the gravel path to drop off the pie her grandmother insisted on sharing. She ran ahead of Evan's greeting, darting toward the side yard where her soccer ball had rolled earlier that day. Neither of them noticed the delivery truck backing down the narrow lane, until Briggs did. The Pitbull bolted from the porch with a speed that defied his limp. Evan shouted, but it was already happening. Briggs reached Sophie just as the truck's tires crunched over the gravel too fast to stop. He nudged her sideways, shielding her small body with his own. The driver slammed the brakes. Dust flew. The truck halted inches from Briggs's flank. Sophie, wide-eyed, clung to the Pitbull's neck. Briggs stood solid, unmoving, between her and danger, his breathing heavy but controlled. It wasn't the first time Evan had seen that stance. It was the posture of someone willing to take the hit. The same posture Evan had held once, shielding his own unit under fire. Later, as he knelt beside Briggs, running a hand over the Pitbull's scarred head, Evan whispered, "You're not just a dog, are you?" Briggs didn't respond with a wag or a lick. He simply leaned into Evan's touch for the briefest moment. That night, Evan flipped the family photos face up. For the first time in years, two broken souls had found each other, a man and a dog who had both forgotten what it meant to hope. But something deeper than survival had drawn them together. Briggs wasn't just a rescued dog, he was a soldier who had once had a mission. And perhaps, just perhaps, he had found a new one. The days after the accident with Sophie passed in a blur. Briggs had returned to his quiet vigil by the door, as if nothing had happened. But Evan couldn't unsee it, the way the Pitbull had moved, fast and deliberate, protecting without hesitation. Not like a house pet, like a soldier. One chilly morning, Evan was cleaning the mud from Briggs' old collar. The leather was cracked, stiff, and stained from years of wear. As he ran a damp cloth along the inside, his fingers caught on something unusual, a small, hard ridge beneath the lining. Curious, he peeled the leather back just enough to reveal a tiny metallic device embedded deep inside. A microchip. But this wasn't the standard ID chip most dogs carried. This one had scratches across its surface, as if someone had tried to damage or erase it. Evan's pulse quickened. He didn't know much about microchips, but he knew someone who did. That evening he called Lena Morris. Lena had served alongside him years ago as a Navy technician. She was sharp, discreet, and had an instinct for trouble. The kind of person you trusted when you didn't want the wrong eyes looking into your business. By the next morning, Lena arrived at his house in her old Jeep, a portable scanner in hand. "Let's see what secrets you've got, Briggs," she murmured, kneeling beside the dog. Briggs sat calmly, unbothered by the device. The scanner beeped softly as she swept it over the chip. The screen flickered, paused, then slowly began to display fragmented data. The name that appeared first made Evan's stomach tighten. Titan. That had been Briggs's original name. But there was more. A unit designation, Redmount Biotech Tactical. Not a name Evan recognized from any official military branch. Beneath that, a chilling phrase blinked faintly across the screen. Behavioral Modification Program, Tier 3 Operative. Evan frowned. Behavioral modification? What the hell does that mean? Lena scrolled through the limited data, her brow furrowing deeper by the second. Not just K9 training. This wasn't about teaching obedience or detection. This was advanced conditioning, testing loyalty thresholds, combat instincts. Artificial stimulus response. Basically, they tried to create super soldier dogs. The Pitbull remained still, almost as if he understood the words being spoken. "But this isn't government standard," Lena continued. "Redmount Biotech Tactical. I've heard whispers. Private military contracts, off-the-books experiments. Programs they shut down before the media or politicians found out." She tapped the last line of available data. Handler, Noah Carter. Status, missing in action. Presumed dead, 3 years ago. Evan rubbed the back of his neck, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air slipping through the old window frames. "I know that name," he said quietly. "Carter. He was listed on a report I read back when I was deployed. I thought he died in an ambush in the Khyber Pass." Lena shook her head. "If he's dead, why erase the dog's records? Why scratch out the chip?" Somebody wanted Titan, Briggs, to disappear too. Her voice lowered. "Evan, You should stop here. This isn't just a stray with a sad history. This is classified. People have killed to keep things like this quiet. Evan looked down at Briggs. The Pitbull's eyes were steady, unwavering. Not just the look of an animal, the look of someone who had already chosen his side. I can't stop, Evan said. If they tried to bury him, what else did they bury? That night, long after Lena had left, Evan stood at the kitchen window, sipping black coffee. Briggs lay by the door, eyes half closed, but ears always alert. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed into the bones. But the silence didn't last. The next morning, Evan received a call. The woman's voice was calm, professional. Mr. Brooks, my name is Clara Hensley. I'm an investigative journalist with the Sentinel Review. I believe you have a dog named Briggs. Evan's grip on the phone tightened. Who gave you my number? No one. I've been tracking unusual adoptions connected to former military K-9 units. Your name came up after the auction in Mesa Valley. Evan hesitated. Why are you interested in Briggs? Because, Clara said quietly, I believe he's not the only dog Redmount tried to erase. Over the past 2 years, I've uncovered at least 6 cases of K-9s from unauthorized behavioral programs, either disappearing or being destroyed after missions ended. Every one of them was labeled unadoptable or aggressive, but the truth is they were silenced because they were evidence. Evidence of what? Illegal human and animal experimentation, violations of the Geneva Conventions. And possibly, assassinations covered up as operational accidents. Evan exhaled slowly, the weight of it sinking in. I want to meet, Clara continued, but you need to understand, once we open this door, we can't close it again. Redmount has eyes everywhere. They don't just erase dogs, they erase people. Evan looked at Briggs, who had lifted his head now, sensing the tension. Then let's open the door, he said, because I think Briggs already kicked it down. And in that moment, he knew. The shadows of the past weren't just creeping into his life. They were already inside. And the only way forward was through. At first, Evan thought it was just his imagination. The dark pickup parked down the road in the evening. The man in a baseball cap who paused too long by the post office boxes. The same sedan making slow passes by the property at odd hours. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was paranoia. But Briggs noticed, too. The Pitbull had grown restless at night. Not anxious, alert. He spent long hours standing by the front window, ears pricked, eyes narrowed. Every creak of the house or distant sound of tires sent him to the door. His instincts were sharper than Evan's own, and they were telling a clear story. They were being watched. Clara Hensley had been cautious from the start. After her first meeting with Evan, she insisted they use prepaid phones and avoid discussing sensitive details over the internet. She was no stranger to the risks that came with exposing military secrets. But even she grew concerned when the strange vehicles kept appearing. You're not imagining it, Clara confirmed during a late afternoon visit. She sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, files scattered. I've had someone tailing me too. Not police, not press, professionals. That same night, the threat became undeniable. It was after midnight when Evan jolted awake. Not from a nightmare, from Briggs. The Pitbull was growling, a low, steady rumble deep in his chest. He stood rigid by the bedroom door, hackles raised. Evan grabbed the flashlight and the baseball bat he kept beside the bed. Briggs was already moving, guiding him silently down the hallway. In the living room, the back door was open. Evan was certain he'd locked it. Before he could process the violation, Briggs lunged. A shadow moved near the window. Briggs struck like lightning, barreling into a figure dressed in dark clothing. The intruder yelped, staggered back, and fled out the open door, disappearing into the night. Evan ran after them, but Briggs outpaced him. The Pitbull chased the figure as far as the fence line before stopping, standing tall and defiant. He didn't bark. He didn't pursue further. He simply watched the darkness where the trespasser had vanished. By the time Evan caught up, breath heavy in his throat, there was no sign of the intruder. Just deep footprints in the dirt and the cold, undeniable fact: someone had tried to get inside. When they returned to the house, Evan checked the room where he kept the few documents he had gathered about Briggs's past. The old chip scanner Lena had used, gone. So was the paper copy of the microchip data, and the scratched collar, no valuables missing. No electronics touched, just the evidence. Whoever had broken in hadn't come to rob him. They had come to erase. The next morning, Clara returned with a grim expression. She examined the disturbed footprints, the missing items, and then sat Evan down. "I've seen this before," she said. "When sources for my last military exposé started disappearing, this is exactly how it started. They take the paper trail first. Then they go after the people." Evan's stomach tightened. "We need to move fast." Clara nodded and slid her laptop forward. "I've been tracking veterinary records, just like we discussed. Dogs matching Briggs' description. Same breed, similar age, same old injuries. Not many, but enough." She clicked through several documents and photographs. One was treated for a bullet wound in New Mexico. Another had surgery for a shattered hip in Nevada. But the most recent? Oregon coast. A small-town vet patched up a pit bull with scars identical to Briggs. Evan leaned closer. The record included a note from the vet. Owner's name, Daniel Price. Paid cash. "No ID provided." Clara tapped the screen. "Daniel Price is an alias." "The handwriting matches another alias I traced. Noah Carter." Evan's pulse quickened. "He's alive," Clara nodded. "And he's been moving from state to state, staying off the grid. Every time with the same dog. Or maybe—" She glanced at Briggs. "Maybe it was Briggs until they were separated." Somehow, Briggs ended up at that auction yard. Evan looked at the pit bull who was lying calmly at the foot of the table, watching them with those steady, intelligent eyes. He felt a surge of determination. They tried to erase him, but they couldn't erase what he knows. Clara closed the laptop. "We need to find Noah before whoever's following us does." Outside, the same dark sedan rolled past the property again. This time, the driver didn't bother to hide his face. A man in sunglasses met Evan's gaze directly before turning back to the road and driving away. It was no longer just a question of discovery. It had become a race against time. And Briggs, once forgotten, once left to be discarded, was now at the very center of a battle neither man nor dog could afford to lose. The road stretched endlessly northward, flanked by forests and the occasional glimpse of rugged coastline beyond the trees. Evan's old truck rattled along the highway as if it too sensed the urgency that had settled between the passengers. Briggs sat in the back seat, his broad head resting on the armrest between Evan and Clara. His calm demeanor never wavered, but Evan could feel the tension beneath the surface. The pit bull had always been quiet, but this silence carried a weight heavier than usual. He was waiting, watching, sensing what lay ahead. Clara scanned the GPS as they entered the outskirts of a small coastal town in Oregon. Fishing boats lined the harbor, and the smell of salt and damp wood filled the air. It was the kind of place where strangers stood out, and locals kept their questions to themselves. "This is it," Clara murmured. "The vet records pointed here. Last known sighting of Noah Carter, or whatever name he's using now." Evan nodded. gripping the wheel tighter. He could feel it in his bones. They were close. They parked near the docks, the fog rolling in from the ocean in thin gray sheets. Workers hauled nets and crates, their faces weathered by years of salt and sun. Evan glanced around, eyes scanning for any sign of someone watching, any trace of the dark sedan that had followed them back home. Nothing. Just the usual rhythm of a town used to minding its own business. Briggs lifted his head, ears perked, his body stiffened. Then he jumped down from the truck. "Briggs," Evan called, but the Pitbull ignored him for the first time since they'd met. Briggs trotted forward, weaving between crates and coiled ropes, moving with a purpose that left no room for doubt. Evan followed quickly, Clara just behind. The Pitbull rounded a corner where a stack of weather-worn lobster traps leaned precariously against a warehouse wall. Beyond them stood a figure in a gray jacket, hands shoved deep into his pockets, hood pulled low. Briggs slowed but didn't stop. His tail didn't wag. He didn't bark. He simply walked up to the man, paused, and gently pressed his head against the man's chest. The man froze. His shoulders trembled. Then, slowly, he sank to his knees, arms wrapping around Briggs as if holding something fragile and irreplaceable. Evan stopped a few steps away, heart pounding. Clara stood beside him, camera forgotten at her side. The man lifted his head. Scars crisscrossed his jaw and temple. His eyes were tired, rimmed with shadows of sleepless nights and years spent running. But even beneath the weight of time and hardship, Evan recognized him from the fragmented military photos Clara had shown him. "Noah Carter," Evan said softly. Noah's eyes widened slightly, as if hearing his name out loud made it real for the first time in years. "I didn't think I'd ever see him again," Noah whispered, voice raw. "Or anyone." For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the sound of the ocean lapping gently against the docks filled the heavy silence. Briggs didn't move. His breathing matched Noah's as though the two were sinking once more, a bond broken by time but never by loyalty. Finally, Evan stepped forward, crouching beside the pair. "He's been looking for you, even if he didn't know it." Noah nodded slowly, his hand stroking Briggs's scarred head. "I thought he was lost. I thought I'd failed him." Clara lowered herself beside them, her voice gentle. "Noah, we need to know what happened. Redmount tried to erase you both. Why?" Noah exhaled, leaning back against the crates. His gaze drifted toward the foggy horizon. "It started 4 years ago. Redmount wasn't just training dogs for standard operations. They were experimenting. Behavioral control. They wanted to create K9 units that didn't just follow commands but could be manipulated remotely, through sound, light patterns, and chemical triggers." Evan's jaw tightened. He had heard rumors of such programs during his service, but nothing this advanced. "They didn't stop with the dogs," Noah continued. "They tested on soldiers too, conditioning responses to orders, dampening hesitation in combat, turning loyalty into something programmable." Clara's eyes darkened. "That's a war crime," Noah nodded. "I was supposed to oversee part of the program. But when I saw what they were doing, how they were pushing both men and dogs beyond safe limits, I reported it." "Or tried to." He paused, running a hand over his face. The scars on his fingers told their own story. "They set us up. My team. They staged an ambush, said it was insurgents. Blew the transport convoy sky high." His voice broke slightly. "Titan, Briggs, pulled me from the wreckage. He disobeyed every order, every bit of conditioning they'd forced into him. He saved my life. We escaped into the desert." Clara leaned in. "And after?" I kept running. State to state. Every time someone got too close, we moved. But last year, they finally found us. During a sweep near Albuquerque, they captured Briggs while I was away gathering supplies. Noah's eyes met Evan's. I thought I'd lost him forever. Letting him go was the hardest decision I've ever made. But I knew. If I tried to get him back, we'd both end up dead. They wanted to erase him. Erase all evidence of what they'd done. Evan reached out, resting a firm hand on Noah's shoulder. He found his way back. And now, so have you. Briggs finally stepped back, as if giving his old handler the space to breathe. Noah looked down at the Pitbull, tears gathering in his eyes. You saved me once, and you saved me again by finding them. The fog thickened around them, but Evan felt a new clarity settle over the group. The pieces were no longer scattered. The memories, the loyalty, the truth, they had survived. Now, it was time to fight back. The morning Clara released the story, the world changed. Her article spread like wildfire across news outlets, social media, and veteran forums. Project Obedience, Redmount Biotech's Forgotten Soldiers. It exposed the secret behavioral modification program, the illegal conditioning of both dogs and soldiers, and the cover-ups that followed. Photos of Briggs, once Titan, appeared everywhere, not as a savage, dangerous dog as Redmount had tried to portray him, but as a survivor, a protector, a silent witness to the truth. Public outrage exploded. Animal rights organizations rallied. Military veterans voiced their support. Within 48 hours, Congress announced a formal investigation into Redmount Biotech Tactical and its subsidiaries. But victory never came easy, and those with the most to lose never surrendered quietly. That evening, Evan, Noah, Clara, Briggs, and little Sophie gathered at the temporary safe house, a rural property borrowed from one of Clara's trusted contacts. Sophie's grandmother had insisted the girl stay with them. If something happens, she had said, he'll protect her better than anyone. She meant Briggs. The house was surrounded by dense forest, a single gravel road winding to the main road a mile away. A quiet place, until the quiet broke. It started with the sound of tires on gravel. More than one vehicle, engines low, controlled, military precision. Briggs heard them first. He rose from his spot beside Sophie, ears pricked, body tense. The scars along his side rippled as he moved. He growled. Not the uncertain growl of a house pet, but the low, resonant warning of a soldier sensing an incoming threat. Evan peered out the front window. 3 black SUVs, headlights off, rolled into view. Men in tactical gear spilled out, rifles ready, faces masked. It's Redmount's cleanup crew, Clara breathed pale. They're here to silence us. Noah grabbed the shotgun he kept by the door. They underestimated us once. Not this time. Take Sophie and get out the back, Evan ordered Clara. No arguments. But Sophie clung to Briggs. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm not leaving without him. Evan knelt beside her, voice gentle but firm. Briggs will keep you safe. You listen to him now. Do what he tells you. He knows better than any of us. The little girl nodded bravely, trusting in the old Pitbull whose courage had already saved her once. The gunfire started seconds later. Glass shattered. Bullets tore through the walls. Evan and Noah returned fire from inside while Clara hurried Sophie and Briggs out the back door, slipping into the shadows of the forest. The attackers were fast and ruthless. They moved like men who had done this before, erasing witnesses, tying up loose ends. But they had never faced an enemy like Briggs. Despite his age, despite the pain in his old bones, The Pitbull led Sophie through the dense underbrush with uncanny precision. Every rustle in the branches, every distant footstep was measured and evaluated. When two armed men circled behind them, Briggs stopped. He positioned himself between Sophie and the threat. The men advanced slowly, rifles lowered to their sides, confident they could subdue a child and an old dog without a struggle. They didn't understand what Briggs was. With a burst of speed, he lunged. Teeth sank into the arm of the nearest attacker, disarming him before the man could cry out. The second man swung his rifle, but Briggs ducked and drove forward, knocking him off balance. Sophie stayed where she'd been told, crouched low, trusting Briggs completely. The first man recovered, drawing a knife. He slashed across Briggs' shoulder, reopening an old scar. Blood darkened the dog's coat, but Briggs didn't back down. He stood his ground, body rigid, gaze unwavering. He wasn't fighting out of rage. He was fulfilling his purpose, protecting his people. The sound of sirens split the night. Redmount's men paused, glancing toward the road where flashing blue and red lights now approached in force. Federal agents poured onto the property, weapons drawn. Clara had triggered the emergency beacon the moment the attack began. Reinforcements had arrived. The masked men retreated into the trees. But it was too late. They were met by agents moving in from the perimeter. Within minutes, the gunfire ceased. Back at the house, Evan and Noah lowered their weapons as the agents secured the scene. "Sophie!" Evan called. "Briggs!" Out of the shadows, Clara emerged, guiding Sophie forward. Behind them, Briggs limped into view. His shoulder bled, his breath came heavy, but he walked tall, chest proud, head high. A warrior's gait. Evan rushed forward, dropping to his knees to embrace Sophie. Briggs leaned into him, pressing his scarred head against Evan's chest. Noah joined them, hand resting on Briggs' back. "You did it," Evan whispered. "You kept her safe." "You kept us all safe." Federal agents detained the surviving attackers. Evidence recovered from their vehicles linked them directly to Redmount's private security division. There would be no more cover-ups. No more erasing the past. In the days that followed, Congress moved swiftly. Redmount's leadership faced criminal charges. Whistleblowers came forward. Soldiers and K-9 handlers who had remained silent out of fear finally found their voices. Briggs became a symbol. Not just of survival, but of resistance, of loyalty that no program or handler could artificially create or destroy. Though his body was weary, though every step now came with effort, he stood beside Evan and Noah during every press briefing, every hearing, every public appearance. Not as a pet, as a soldier, as the last warrior standing guard over a truth too powerful to be silenced. The fall of Redmount did not come with the roar of battles or the blare of headlines. It came quietly, steadily, like the turning of a tide too long resisted. In the months following the raid, federal prosecutors dismantled the company piece by piece. Executives were indicted. The covert programs that had cost so many lives, human and canine alike, were exposed and shut down. Former soldiers and K-9 handlers finally stepped into the light to tell their stories. But for Evan, Noah, Clara, and Briggs, the end of Redmount was not the end of the mission. It was only the beginning. Using settlement funds from the lawsuit and donations pouring in from across the country, they founded Sentinel Haven. Not just a shelter, a sanctuary, a place where retired military dogs, once discarded like broken tools, could find peace. Where veterans could come for support, therapy, and community, and where the story of those who had been erased could finally be told. The facility wasn't fancy. An old training compound repurposed and rebuilt. Simple buildings, wide open fields, and shaded trails weaving through quiet woods. It was designed not just for rehabilitation, but for remembrance. At the heart of the haven stood a hall lined with photographs and plaques, stories of canines and handlers who had served together, survived together, and sometimes fallen together. And in the largest frame, mounted above the entrance, was a single photo. Evan, Noah, Clara, young Sophie standing proudly between them, and Briggs. Briggs, whose face had aged, but whose eyes still burned with that unwavering light. Beneath the photo, bold lettering read, "He didn't just survive the war. He became the reason we all found our way back." Briggs had become more than a survivor. More than a soldier. He had become the symbol of everything they stood for. Sophie, now 11, was Sentinel Haven's youngest volunteer. She spent her afternoons walking the dogs, reading to them, and comforting those still learning how to trust again. She had once told a reporter during a televised interview, her voice clear and sure, "Briggs taught me that courage doesn't have to bark loudly. Sometimes it's just staying when others would run." Those words became a quiet motto at the Haven. Each evening, as the sun dipped toward the horizon and the sky blushed in shades of amber and gold, Briggs would rise from his spot beside Evan's chair. His movements were slower now, careful, the weight of his years undeniable, but his purpose remained. He would make his way to the gate at the edge of the property, the same gate where new arrivals were greeted, the same gate where old friends had once parted ways. Briggs would sit there, gaze fixed down the long gravel road. Some days visitors would watch him and ask, "What's he waiting for?" Evan would always answer softly, "He's not waiting, he's watching, he's standing guard," because Briggs understood something most people never did. Even when wars ended, the battle for healing, for dignity, for memory, that fight continued. One crisp autumn afternoon, Clara found Evan and Noah working to repair the main barn. Briggs lay nearby, eyes half closed but ears always listening. Clara carried a file. She looked serious but also somehow at peace. "The Senate passed the Canine Veterans Protection Act today," she announced. "Mandatory retirement plans and care for all military dogs. Nationwide." Evan leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow. "About time." Noah chuckled, though his eyes shimmered with emotion. Briggs made sure they couldn't ignore it anymore. That evening, volunteers gathered in the main hall. Veterans, families, local supporters, and a few officials who had once turned a blind eye but now stood humbled. They honored Briggs, not with fanfare or medals, but with stories. A retired Marine spoke of the dog who had pulled him from rubble after an IED strike. A young woman shared how her therapy, K9, once a forgotten military dog, had saved her from despair. And Sophie, standing tall despite the tears in her eyes, placed a single collar, Briggs' first collar from the auction yard, into the Hall of Honor display. "This was who the world thought he was," she said softly. "Lot 82, just a number." Just a burden. She paused, smiling. But we knew better. He was the last Sentinel. That night, as the moon rose silver over Sentinel Haven, Evan sat beside Briggs on the front porch. The Pitbull leaned against his leg, breath steady, gaze still watching the road. Noah joined them, lowering himself carefully onto the steps. Clara came soon after with Sophie wrapped in a blanket, leaning against her side. They sat in comfortable silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Briggs' eyes remained fixed on the gate, not because he expected danger, but because some habits ran deeper than scars, and as long as there was a road for soldiers, human or canine, to come home on, someone had to keep watch. That was Briggs' legacy. Not the battles he fought, not the injuries he bore, but the lives he held together. The people he led back to themselves. In the years that followed, many dogs and veterans found peace at Sentinel Haven. Some stayed. Some moved on, but none ever forgot the old Pitbull who sat by the gate at sunset. Briggs was never again called Lot 82. He was the last sentinel, the warrior who kept memories alive, who stood between the past and the future, who reminded everyone that loyalty, courage, and love could outlast even the deepest darkness. And in the golden light of every sunset, it was said that if you watched closely, you could still see him there. Watching, waiting, guarding the way home. Briggs was never just Lot 82. He became the last sentinel, the guardian of memories, and the reason so many found their way back to themselves. At Vale Marks, we believe stories like his remind us that even in darkness, loyalty and love endure. If this journey touched your heart, please leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Your support will help us reach 1,000 subscribers and, more importantly, inspire us to create even deeper, more meaningful stories for everyone who still believes in the strength of silent warriors. As an old saying goes, a hero is not the one who never falls, but the one who rises every time after the fall. Until the next story, stay steadfast, stay hopeful, and never forget those who stood watch so we could find our way home.